A potential lifeline tonight for the Port Talbot Steelworks in Wales. They should stay open for at least 5 years with £1 billion worth of investment, but workers' pensions will be hit.
There's a lot more hope for people, especially Christmas coming up now. They feel a lot more secure.
Also on News at 10 tonight, the Prime Minister's gamble on this evening's Brexit vote looks to have worked, more or less. Peston takes to the Row with Rihanna's roadie, bizarre but true, and other Brexit voters to find out what they think of the way it's being handled so far. New football abuse allegations. The Scottish side Partick Thistle admits it knew of alleged sexual abuse more than 20 years ago but didn't alert the authorities. And get your £5 notes ready. We'll be showing you why a handful in circulation are worth tens of thousands. Yes, honestly.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Back in March, you'll recall, I'm sure, that it looked like the end of the road for Britain's biggest steelworks at Port Talbot in South Wales. But it does look tonight as though the plant's 4,000 workers, their families and countless others in the area might be able to breathe a sigh of relief. The plant's owners, Tata Steel, now plan to keep it going with its furnaces burning for at least 5 more years and with a 10-year investment plan. If they do approve the deal, Tata workers will take a hit on their pensions, but it's a massive step forward from where everyone was in March.
For months, the steel mills have also served as rumour mills, as the workers here have tried to guess what their future will hold. Tonight, they know. Tata had wanted out, and now they've confirmed they are staying in, making commitments to jobs, investment, and 5 years of production at least. It is a good day, but with formal consultation yet to start, there's still much to be done. You a happy man today?
I'm happier than I was. I'm still concerned about some of the issues that we've got to face, and it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be some tough times ahead. But if the unions stick together and the workforce stick together, we've proved what we can do.
We now have the precise numbers on what we reported last night. There will be an investment in the plant at Port Talbot, £1 billion over the next 10 years. As expected, 2 blast furnaces will be kept running at the plant for at least 5 years, and as hoped, a commitment to reinvest in blast furnace number 5. Crucially, a commitment from Tata Steel that they will seek to avoid any redundancies for the same period. Yet, as expected, workers will have to accept reduced pensions with the closure of the existing final salary scheme. Facing shutdown back in the spring, then Business Secretary Sajid Javid came to reassure steelworkers. There was one question that day that stood out.
Have we got an industry? Have we got an industry?
I say the industry is absolutely vital to the future of the UK industrial sector.
Lyndon Jones was asking the question then. Tonight we asked him if he finally has an answer.
It's going to be very interesting times ahead, but there's a lot more hope for people, especially Christmas coming up now. They feel a lot more secure. I should imagine you'll see a lot more relaxed people around the place and not somebody stressed out.
But there is still concern about how today's commitments will be kept if, as expected, Tata Steel Europe join forces with the German giant ThyssenKrupp. But should you merge with another company or be bought out by another company, can you keep those guarantees?
If we are strong on our feet, nobody can move us.
You're not really answering the question, are you? If you merge with another company, which is the plan, will you keep the commitments that you've made today?
It will be stupid of anybody to close a plant which is profitable.
And it is making a profit right now?
Right now, it's not yet into profits.
Profitability here depends on removing the pension liability, and should this plan be approved, then given the right economic circumstances, they won't just make steel in Port Talbot, but money too.
And Rupert joins us now. Rupert, from what we've heard today, this sounds, pretty promising in the round, but how much of a reprieve is it, do you think, for the workers there?
Well, it is, but, and the but is crucial in all of this, this plant needs to turn a profit. It needs to be self-sustaining. If it can do that, it will stay open. It really is as simple as that. So they've removed the liability of the pension. That will certainly help in it producing a profit. The money that it makes will form part of that £1 billion investment. They won't go to the city. They won't go back to India, Tata there to get the money in. It needs to come from here. Of course, if the pound were to strengthen, if the price of steel was to go up, or in fact China started dumping yet more steel on the world, all of those could have an impact. So yes, it is a reprieve, but it may well be one that doesn't last as long as many hope.
Rupert, it's a very up and down economy at the moment, but thank you very much indeed. Now, we saw one of those votes in the Commons this evening on the government's Brexit plans, upon which just about everyone seems to be able to claim success. The government had a big majority in favour of its plans to start the process that will lead us out of the EU before March next year. Mrs May appeared to have got her way, but there was a condition attached that the government publishes its plan for Brexit first. You might call that a score draw, I suppose, but the plan, in inverted commas, does seem to be rather loosely defined. Imagine that in politics these days. The Brexit Secretary, David Davis, made pretty clear during the debate that setting out the government's strategy would stop short of revealing anything at all that would jeopardise Britain's negotiating position.
When Theresa May took office, there was no mistaking what the referendum meant to her.
Brexit means Brexit.
She was always clear, emphatic even.
This is going to be a deal that works for Britain.
And this week, as ministers called for clarity, she gave them this.
It's about a red, white and blue Brexit. That is the right Brexit, the right deal for Britain.
Order! Order!
Now she's agreed to publish a plan before triggering our exit from Europe.
The ayes to the right, 461. The noes to the left, 89.
MPs tonight backed her timetable to start negotiations in March after she conceded details would be released. A victory, claimed Labour, who earlier said they forced her into it.
Are any members of this House content not to know? Hands up who doesn't want to know. Doesn't want to know. Hands up. You don't want to know.
It must be detailed, he said, and published by January. But the Brexit Secretary was clear he needed wriggle room.
The government must have the flexibility to adjust during negotiations. It's like threading the eye of a needle. If you've got a good eye and a steady hand, it's easy enough. If somebody jogs your elbow, it's harder. If 650 people jog your elbow, it's very much harder.
Tory Europhiles, though, lined up to demand substance, not sound bites.
Will he accept that the House requires a description, published in a white paper preferably, of the strategic objectives that the government is going to be pursuing?
I want a white paper. I want legislation. I want to go through the lobbies and make a difference about our relationship with the EU to secure a strong future for everybody and for generations to come.
The government has always said that it won't discuss its position on leaving Europe, but by agreeing to a plan, it's being forced to show some of its hand. Once published, the details could then be scrutinised and picked over here in the Commons for weeks to come. That's precisely what Theresa May wanted to avoid.
That then may affect how much detail we do get. Christmas might be coming, but there's no guarantee the government will be giving us the meaning of Brexit anytime soon. Emily Morgan, News at 10 in Westminster.
So, plenty of contrasting views there in Emily's report on how Brexit is being handled in the Commons. But what about away from the Westminster bubble? Well, our political editor, Robert Peston, has left his normal haunts and set off on a road trip to hear what Brexit supporters think now, nearly 6 months on. And yes, it really is that long ago. He started his journey in Hull, a port city that faces towards Europe, but in which most people voted to leave. Here then is Robert on the road.
Hull, gateway to Europe, perhaps less of a gateway since we voted to leave the European Union. But haulier Mark, who voted leave and spends his life carrying expensive kit such as Rihanna's sound system from one end of Europe to another, doesn't mind that Brexit may well mean more hassle for him crossing borders.
Sure the EU says I've got to put my seatbelt on? Yes. If the British government, right, after we leave, simply decides all these laws about how you're regulated are fine, are you going to feel very let down?
Yes, I would feel let down, but I would think that going back to Britain looking after its own industry, the transport industry itself, I think we would have more voice.
Yeah.
And they would listen.
Now, this part of Hull voted overwhelmingly to get out. But here at the Gold Crest, the Remainers were out in force, perhaps drowning their sorrows.
In my back of my mind, I still think it's not going to happen. I still think there's enough stoppages in a way, and actually we're not going to see the vote that people did vote for and decide on.
I can understand that a lot of people in this area will have been, you know, a bit, maybe treated it as a protest vote.
Yeah.
What was your motivation for voting Brexit?
I was feeling that the life around me was changing. And I felt helpless, and that was the only way I felt I could make my point.
And so, to a huge market in Leeds, Kirkgate, not quite as important as Europe's single market. Now, Dave, a fishmonger, voted to leave. He has no regrets, but...
I think the EU's been unnecessarily harsh to Britain, but then we're not actually leaving the EU yet, with the process not starting.
But what the Brexit vote has started, says Lawrence in textiles, is shrinkage for his business.
My business is certainly down by at least about 20%. Yeah, and I also felt as though we would end up with price rises because our currency would also devalue. And both those points are absolutely disastrous for a small businessman.
You voted to remain. How do you feel now?
Well, I don't know. We just hope for the best now, innit?
As Farida says, we're going somewhere new. So, thanks very much. Can you take me to Pontefract? Lovely, thank you. I've been struck by the number of people who said to me, sometimes grumpily, that although we voted to leave in June, we're nowhere near actually getting out of the European Union. The Prime Minister will soon feel like a parent in the front of a car, listening to the nation saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" A spectacular view of our industrial past. It's our future that's harder to see. Here I am, king of the Pontefract Castle, which was razed to the ground in the English Civil War. And sometimes in all the argy-bargy since the referendum, there's been a fear that we're on the verge of another civil war. And just maybe, the revolution starts here. You voted Remain, you voted Leave. Do you think the referendum has brought British people together, or in fact has widened divisions?
Oh, it might have widened divisions. I think possibly, yes, widened divisions, yeah.
And what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's widened people's views, and especially about immigration.
The reason you feel you can't judge it yet is because, of course, we are still in the European Union.
Yes, yeah, nothing's changed.
The country should see this as an opportunity, an absolute opportunity, and grab it, and grab it.
And now Huddersfield, which gave us Harold Wilson, who in turn gave us a first referendum that delivered more than 40 years of EU membership. Tomorrow, I go west to ask you about the next 40 years. Robert Peston, News at 10 in Yorkshire.
And as he said, Robert's journey west, complete with this year's must-have fashion item, the furry hood, will continue tomorrow when he goes across the Pennines to Journey's End in Liverpool and a visit to the old Beatles venue, the Cavern Club. Now, in a drastic change of tone, back to a story that's been running for weeks and looks set, unfortunately, to do so. Aside from the obvious and often terrible damage to the victims, one of the worrying themes emerging from the child abuse scandal in football is that some people seem to know what was going on, yet didn't tell others in the game, or indeed elsewhere. As more cases come to light, there seems to be a pattern. Young players raise concern about a suspect coach. He's persuaded to leave the club under a cloud, and yet he turns up somewhere else and starts abusing all over again. Today, the Glasgow club, Partick Thistle, told News at 10 it did not report a physio who it sacked in the 90s over abuse allegations.
As Partick Thistle's physiotherapist, John Hart was trusted to be alone with footballers, including children. But in 1992, he was accused of abusing a child. The club's way of dealing with it then was to sack him, quietly, and leave it unreported. In a statement tonight, Partick Thistle's current board confirm they have identified one historic allegation of abuse made against a former club employee who is now deceased. The employee worked for the club for 2 years as a physiotherapist. As soon as the allegation of abuse was raised in 1992, the club dismissed the individual with immediate effect. But because it wasn't reported to police or the Scottish FA, John Hart carried on working as a physio at his own private practice, treating people who had no idea of the sinister allegations that led to him being sacked. But John Hart appeared again at Partick Thistle, this time in the club's official matchday programme. On his death in 1995, they published a gushing obituary. This is John Hart's photograph here. In the obituary, they talk about him being one of the best physiotherapists in the country and praise his incredible sense of humour, which they say was marvellous for morale. They even say that club officials attended his funeral, but there was no mention of the reason why he was dismissed just 3 years earlier. Partick Thistle have now reported Hart to police and the Scottish FA for investigation. Also in Scottish football, former Celtic youth coach and kitman Jim McCafferty has tonight been charged over allegations he was abusing young footballers. And another former footballer has accused Eddie Heath of abusing him while at Charlton, but Russell Davey says he was ignored when he tried to speak out.
I was just hoping that someone out there was listening. Perhaps it could have, the boys that have been abused after me, some of that might have got stopped. It should have come out years ago.
One of the survivors of this abuse has now turned his criticism on the English FA after it emerged they don't even have a start date for their own review into abuse in football.
It should have started from day one. That's my opinion. Why they're waiting? Maybe they're waiting for news to overcast what's happening at the moment. And that's what it seems like. They should. New cases are coming out every day. More and more people. I mean, this could go on and on and on.
Now those who are left to clean up the game's reputation are demanding to know who knew what about this nationwide scandal and why so many were happy to kick such serious allegations into the long grass. Peter Smith, News at 10, Glasgow.
Really is such an incredibly disturbing story. Abroad now, there will perhaps be no single moment when we can say the siege of Aleppo, once Syria's largest city, is over. But there was another sign today that the rebels' hold over eastern Aleppo is coming to an end. They are asking for a ceasefire as President Assad's forces take back control of the heart of the old city. This is a part of it, the old souk, or rather what it used to look like before the war in Syria began. This is it now, as the rebels give up their positions in the old city. Similarly, this is how the Grand Mosque of Aleppo looked before the bombs started falling. And this is what is left of it now, well over 1,000 years of history in ruins.
These are the last final days of rebel-held eastern Aleppo, and it's being crushed without mercy. Syrian government forces, supported by Russia and Iran, continue to pulverize eastern Aleppo, which has now effectively fallen in all but name. It's why today's statement by Western leaders, including Theresa May, condemning Assad's forces and Russia for what it calls a humanitarian disaster and urging a ceasefire, only goes to show their impotence. Assad and his supporters stand on the brink of retaking Aleppo. Activists say the situation is now hellish.
We don't have enough medicine. We don't have hospitals, except just one in service. We don't have enough fuel. The people here are looking for the broken furniture for warming.
Syrian government troops moved through the old city of Aleppo, the highly symbolic district that rebels took 5 years ago. Tonight, President Assad said Aleppo was the last hope of the rebels. Its recapture would change the whole war, and he ominously vowed to take back all rebel-held Syria. Russia, which has helped him by bombing Aleppo, said the endgame for the city was being played out.
The eastern part of Aleppo is almost freed, just half of it. And more than 100,000 people were liberated. So we're basically expecting that Aleppo will be taken by the Syrian army sometime in the near future.
Assad's troops showed off what they said was an arms factory in the Hanano district abandoned by rebels. Here they find an ambulance donated from Rochdale and another from Germany, as well as aid meant for children and hospitals. But in reality, Assad retaking Aleppo will not bring the end of Syria's war closer. In fact, it'll make the search for peace more difficult, as rebels feel abandoned by the West and see no choice but to fight to the end, however long that takes. Raghi Omar, News at 10.
And it seems the rebels are fighting to the end. Syria's state news agency reported today that rebel shelling of government-controlled parts of Aleppo had killed 12 people and injured more than 60 others. By any standards, seeing the price of something multiply by 23 times overnight is pretty shocking. When that something is a medical drug used by nearly 50,000 people in the UK to control their epilepsy, well, the two drugs companies involved must have expected a bit of a backlash, and today they got it. One, Pfizer, got a record fine, £84 million. The other, Flynn Pharma, £5 million. The Competition Authority called what they'd done excessive and unfair.
Before it became a medicine, it was an idea.
Pfizer invests time, energy and money in developing its drugs. The company expects to profit from their investment, but today Pfizer was fined for profiteering at the NHS's expense. Rosemary Mason says she relies on the anti-epilepsy drug Pfizer developed to control her seizures. But 4 years ago, the cost to the NHS of providing Rosemary with her pills soared overnight.
The transition of going to another tablet that may suit you, or starting from the beginning to get you used to a tablet, is difficult. When you have changes, I mean, it says on the tablet box here, do not stop taking this medicine unless your doctor tells you to stop.
An investigation by the Competition and Markets Authority decided Pfizer took advantage of a loophole that enabled the company to sell the British distribution rights to another company called Flynn. Flynn debranded the drug and sold it as a generic product. In doing so, it avoided a profit cap agreed between big drug makers and the NHS. Pfizer and Flynn hiked the price to £67.50, 20 times the original cost, and the NHS was forced to pay as they were the only suppliers. This is not the first case of price fixing. An investigation by The Times found that the NHS had been overcharged for 50 other drugs made by different manufacturers, costing it an extra £262 million since 2010.
What is unacceptable is for people to find mechanisms to put up prices when it's not justified either by costs or by additional clinical benefit to patients.
At Pfizer, we're doing our part.
Pfizer and Flynn deny the price the NHS was charged was either unfair or excessive. Both intend to appeal. In the meantime, they've been given up to 4 months to lower the price of the drug to an acceptable level. Joel Hills, News at 10.
First, he won the American presidency against all the odds. Now he is Time magazine's Person of the Year. So whatever else you might say about Donald Trump, he is clearly on a bit of a winning streak. With the magazine cover today, he follows in some famous footsteps. Pope Francis, Angela Merkel, and going back a bit, Adolf Hitler. It's probably worth pointing out that the magazine's decision is not meant to denote approval, merely a recognition of the person in question's impact on the world. On its front page, it calls him President of the Divided States of America. Mr. Trump himself, though, has been out and about on his thank you tour again, but also trying to heal some of those divisions.
This is Donald Trump's thank you tour, and now he has something else to celebrate. 3 years after the president-elect said Time magazine's time had come, it's named him Person of the Year, something his supporters never doubted.
He is the man, and you're going to be proud of him. The whole world's going to be proud of him.
Oh, every time I get out of the car, I want to haul trucks. Every time I go in the store, I want to haul trucks.
The question is whether the title is really an honor when it comes with the caveat, President of the Divided States of America.
When you say divided states of America, I didn't divide them. They're divided now. I mean, there's a lot of division, and we're going to put it back together.
But can he? Last night's rally was held here in North Carolina, one of the divided states ITV News filmed in the summer. It's hard to imagine a life further from Trump's gilded existence than collecting junk for a living. But Rob voted for the man he thinks of as a hero and says Time magazine's right.
He did something most men couldn't do. I think he should be President of the Year because the whole year, that's all they talked about.
For Pastor Larry, so optimistic 6 months ago, things feel a lot more complicated.
It was almost like a death in the family. You know, that's why we're going to give him a window. And we're going to say, we're going to do everything we can to support our president. But if he's not our president, you know, then you can't support someone that don't support you. You can't respect someone that don't respect you.
Back at the rally, there was a brief mention of leaving no one behind before more of the same.
It's natural, isn't it, for an election winner to want to savour his victory and for his supporters to prolong their celebration. But when it comes to conciliation and putting America back together, there's been rather less.
We need to learn how to get along together.
Just a few miles away, mending what's broken is Anne's lifeblood. She fixes up bicycles for children too poor to afford one. Her prescription is simple.
We need to learn how to love one another, no matter what their backgrounds are.
Can you love Donald Trump?
See, you put me on the spot there. Yeah, I can love Donald Trump. I mean, I like him, but I can love him.
The man backed by millions for tearing the establishment apart now has to prove he can put communities like this back together. Rachel Younger, News at 10, North Carolina.
Fascinating piece. And finally, don't check your purses or wallets just yet, but 4 very special £5 notes are circulating tonight, which could be worth far more than their face value, several £1,000s more, in fact. An artist has engraved an image of the author Jane Austen on the front of the notes near the Big Ben hologram, if you're checking already. Now the race is on to find them, and remember, there are only 4, one each in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
He only works at night, and to maintain absolute stillness wears a stethoscope so he can engrave between heartbeats. And the latest work by this renowned micro artist has become extremely desirable. This is one of the £5 notes on which Graham Short has engraved a 6mm portrait of novelist Jane Austen and a quote. This note is destined to go into circulation in Wales. The other 3 he's engraved are somewhere in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. His artistic tribute to a literary great.
Next year is Jane Austen's 200th anniversary of her death, and there'll be lots of events next year. And also, she had a passion for reverence and ridicule. And I thought if I could put her portrait onto a £5 note, that's something that would really appeal to her, I would have done.
So you've introduced a brand new Christmas game this festive season, which is, have you got one of those special £5 notes?
Yes, that's exactly it. And I hope people enjoy looking for the notes. Obviously, there's only one in each country, so there aren't going to be thousands turning up. But it would be nice if somebody does find one.
Graham Short has won international acclaim for his micro works of art. This portrait of the Queen inside the eye of a needle sold for £100,000. It's thought his Jane Austen series could be worth around £20,000 each.
Because he's a well-known artist, his works will go apparently for many thousands. So if anybody does find these notes, they could find themselves, or find any one of the notes, they could find themselves sitting on, a few £1,000s, possibly more.
In some lights, you can't see the Jane Austen at all. However, if you move the £5 note, there she is. If you want to see the detail and read the quotes, well, that will require a magnifying glass.
No Jane Austen, I'll have a look on another one.
Tonight, the hunt for the Jane Austen notes had already started. Somewhere out there are the golden tickets. Works of art, maybe. A nice Christmas bonus, definitely. Nina Nanar, News at 10 in Birmingham.
All I can say is it wasn't me. Maybe tomorrow. Speaking of which, let's see what might be making the news tomorrow. The Supreme Court hearing on Brexit, which began on Monday, winds up. The judges have to decide whether Parliament should have a say in when to start the leaving process. Their verdict, though, won't be made public until January. And the by-election in Sleaford in Lincolnshire is being held. It was triggered by the resignation of the Conservative MP over the very issue the Supreme Court is examining. Stephen Phillips wanted Parliament to have a say in triggering Article 50. I will be here tomorrow for that and much more, unless I've found the right £5.